السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله رب العالمين، الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت، الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and die not except on the state of Islam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. أما بعد، يقول رب العزة سبحانه وتعالى في سورة المدثر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Muddathir, starting in this ayah with the كلا، يقول كلا والقمر والليل إذ أدبر والصبح إذا أسفر إنها لإحدى الكبر نذيرا للبشر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refuting in this ayah all what has been said about Saqar. And Saqar, wal-'iyadhu billah, is the hellfire. People are denying, people are disputing about the numbers of the angels who are going to be guarding it. But the point is not that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to put the true emphasis on the right purpose of mentioning the hellfire, the description of the hellfire, what it does and what its purpose is. It's not about to dispute about it and to think something like, is an imaginary thing. No, it's a reality. It does exist now. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it with what it is. It's very scary, but that is saqar. For this reason, Allah used 3 oaths. كَلَّا وَالْقَمَرِ وَاللَّيْلِ إِذْ أَدْبَرَ وَالصُّبْحِ إِذَا أَسْفَرَ. Nay. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these 2 oaths, one with the magnificence of His creation, the moon, and 2 phenomena which showcase Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala greatness and power. How the phenomena of the night was retreating and the day was breaking and brightening. And you see brights and the light, which is actually similar, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings you this qasam to have you reflect on His greatness, on His power, and how this perfect, precise system, how it's functioning, but also to give you a hint for your reflection that as the light is coming up, that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala how He eradicates and removes the darkness of the misguidance, the darkness of the corruption by the light of Islam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with 3 oaths to help us understand and emphasize and shake our heart to know that this is ihda al-kubar. This is of the greatest calamities ever into the life of the existence, in the existence itself. قَالَ إِنَّهَا لَإِحْدَى الْكُبَرِ. One of the greatest, catastrophes, calamities, just to emphasize on the fact that is the highest of the calamities. Because to make it distinguish among those tremendous and big and great in how being, catastrophic. Saqar is the highest of them, which is hellfire. As some of the scholars, they say, in the 6th level of hellfire, at the hellfire it has seven levels. The worst is the 7th, قال الدرك الأسفل من النار والعياذ بالله. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminding us of this reality, reminding us of this truth, something that exists. And by reminding us to say this is a warning to the humankind, a warning to the humankind, a warning to humankind followed by your own free will. لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَن يَتَقَدَّمْ أَوْ يَتَأَخَّرْ. To whom among you who wish to advance toward the faith, or to let back, or to stay behind. Lagging back, staying behind, not caring. But when someone, subhanAllah, is going back, not moving forward toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is going to fall in saqar. That's why the believer, when you're reflecting in such a thing, he only has one drive, is need to push him going toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, proceeding and advancing and racing toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing that one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Muqaddimu wal-Mu'akhir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He the one advance and delays and push back. And the one who advanced them to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are the nearest to Him. And those who delay are those who push them away, subhanAllah, and make a veil between Him and them. Therefore, the believer, when you're thinking about such a thing and you read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it need to initiate, set a drive into your heart to push you toward advancing toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that drive that we have to construct, that we have to build, to be really from those people who honor themselves. لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَن يَتَقَدَّمَ أَوْ يَتَأَخَّرْ. Therefore, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying such a thing, how are you going to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? By immersing yourself into the light of the guidance. So the light of the guidance, you're going to do it by strong faith, and by the second one is to advance and hastening to do the good. And by doing the good, truly by doing the good, how are you going to help yourself being cleansed? How are you going to help being purified? How you make those racing toward the good is a nature in you. You're going to make it as a habit. And this is how you make taqaddum ilallah. So you're advancing toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to come by dreaming or being passive or by just moving the tongue or just coming to Ramadan or only to to the Jumu'ah. That is not going to help, because that way, subhanAllah, someone is going behind or delaying themselves without knowing. Because if you do not advance a certain rhythm, you find yourself really delaying. You are saying yourself lagging back. You find yourself staying behind. And this is the mubadara, the hasting, and to go, to take advantage of the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you this various gifts that you cannot enumerate. Your life, your health, the state of ease that you have, all of it, subhanallah, are the gifts that you need to take advantage as long as you have them to advance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the basis and the fundamental, or I say the principle or the foundation of advancing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need that drive. You need that high spirit to drive you to do so. So how someone, a believer, wishing and deciding and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the taqaddum ilallah, the taqaddum, advancing toward the faith, advancing toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is going to be made easy to you by al-muqaddimu subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to facilitate for you the advancing toward Him. And this is start by a faith, by sincerity, by a true iman, by a genuine and sound iman into your heart. The first element, that it will build the seeds that you need to plant, and then they grow to give you this strong drive. The first one is for someone to be, subhanAllah, aware and mindful of three things: the state of ease that they are in, the time around them, the time that dictate their life, and the state of everything around them. When I say afiyah wa hal, the afiyah is what Allah gave you as a gift. Your hal, the state, how you behave, how you think, how mindful you are of the situation and the time. Because the frame in which you're going to advance to Allah is the time. Then the time, you don't know what is going to happen next. There is people, they be longing and making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reach Ramadan, but they didn't. They passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them and shower them with His mercy. They passed away. Allah gave you the ability to be in the night of Ramadan. You continue to make shukr to Allah and ask Him, Ya Allah, help me then to reach Laylatul Qadr. That's your advancing. You have the sincerity, you have the drive. You are aware and mindful of the gift that you have. And this awareness, this mindfulness help you to really build the drive. For this reason, the Prophet ﷺ قال بادروا بالأعمال قبل سبعة بادروا بالأعمال سبعا. This is the hadith. Hastening, doing good deeds before 7 affliction will happen to you or will come to you. The first affliction, the Prophet ﷺ قال فقرا منسيا. Someone can be struck by poverty that make person forgetful. SubhanAllah, they cannot even think. قال أو غنى مطغية. Or someone, SubhanAllah, becomes rich that lead them to transgression. Because there's people that are longing to become rich. They do not know by becoming rich it's going to be the way of corruption. From among those who were around the Prophet ﷺ, they promised, he said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Surah At-Tawbah as among those who are munafiqun. قال ومنهم من عاهد الله لئن آتانا من فضله لنصدقن ولنكونن من الصالحين. From those who promise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you give us out of your bounties, Ya Allah, and you give us wealth, we will give into your sake, Ya Allah, and you will be from the righteous. But when Allah gave them that, they retreat back. Instead of using it to make taqaddum to Allah, they went ta'akhur, which is like they lack back, they stayed behind. Why? Because this heavy wealth, it became like heavy on their heart, corrupted them and make them to be, subhanAllah, clinging to the gravity of this earth, of this worldly life. But then the believer has to think about that. This is when we ask for wealth, ask for what make you to be closer to Allah. Do not ask for wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will satisfy you and give you the right provision, inshallah. But to want to be such a thing, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أو غنى مطغية قال أو مرضا مفسدا. Of someone, subhanallah, a disease that corrupt person. He cannot do anything. He's always under treatment and things. But now you have sahha, you have subhanallah. So when you think about the time, what is going to happen to you next? That's why one of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he wake up and he can stand and he can make salat, said, Alhamdulillah ladhi radda li ruhi, give me back first my life, my soul, which is like, this is a new gift for this day that I'm still alive. And then the other gift of sahha, of health. You are able to pray, you are able to stand, you are able to speak, you are able to see, so you can contemplate, speak, you can make dhikr and so on. قال أو مرضا مفسدا أو هرما مفندا. And an old age make a person feeble. Don't wait till that point. قال أو موتا مجهزا, أو sudden death. Subhanallah. Person died, he didn't even write his will, he didn't anything, and death will come. Mujhiza comes very fast. Someone he didn't think about it. Why he didn't think about it? Because he never thought about it. Because the death, subhanAllah, might closer to you, as the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith said, to the laces of your shoe. They closer to you. That's how death is closer to us. It's close to us. You don't know when we're going to depart. We don't know. That's why being mindful of time, being mindful of your state, and being mindful of the gift that you have. You have all of this. You have all of this. But what are you doing with this, such a thing? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَكُنْ سَقَرْ, when you think of Jahannam, don't you want to be there? You know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the previous ayah about Jahannam? And you can read the Quran. This is the month of the Quran that we need to interact with the Quran. We need to absorb the meaning of the Quran to help us really cleanse our hearts, to help us rejuvenate our iman, to help us renew our oath with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال لا تبقي ولا تذر. It does not keep, leave anyone alive or dead, which is mean like it burns everything. And then one who burned, he does not die. That's the thing. Because he's going to have a new skin, and then new feeling, and new torture. Can you imagine if the worry and the anguish of everybody in this whole world, all combined, all together in one person, with all the pain that everybody has combined in one person, will not be comparable of someone in Saqar. To understand how fearful and how horrible this Saqar is the biggest calamities. That's why one of the Salihin said, every calamity that happened to them, they will think, Alhamdulillah that I'm not in hellfire. So this is, compared to hellfire, is nothing. May Allah give me the riza, I'm pleased, Alhamdulillah. قال أو موتا مجهزا, قال أو الدجال فشر ينتظر, فشر غائب ينتظر. The worst awaited evil is the Dajjal. Can you imagine you live when it comes to the Dajjal? Who will be among us to stand in and firm on the way of the belief? We don't know Allah. It's the biggest fitna ever, as the Prophet ﷺ told us. قال أو الساعة والساعة أدهى وأمر. Or the hour, and the hour is more catastrophic and more bitter. This is, dear brother, respected sister, this is how we build the drive. If you are passive toward our situation, if one not mindful of all these aspects of the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you, to use them to honor yourself by advancing to Allah, making taqaddum ila Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, لِمَنْ شَاءَ مِنْكُمْ أَن يَتَقَدَّمْ أَوْ يَتَأَخَّرْ. So it's up to you. And if it's up to us, then we want to honor ourselves. And how to honor ourselves? Elevate that level of drive into our heart to be like advancing fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah in the Quran say, race, hasten, sari'u ila maghfiratin min rabbikum. Sabiqu, He made it in a way like, subhanAllah, there is that drive, that high spirit who help you to really be fasting or racing and hastening yourself toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the action of the good. The second one, the second element, which is a seed that we need to reflect on during this Ramadan to help us really build this drive, because that's what we need, is your belief, certain belief in al-wa'id, in the warning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like the example of Saqar, the example of hellfire that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not a threaten of a most merciful, which is me like, oh, it's not, it just, telling you this is not going to happen. No, not is going to happen. It's happening. It's really exists now. The Prophet ﷺ, in his ascension in Al-Mi'raj, he saw hellfire. He saw it. He said, I have seen what you did not see. If you see what I have seen, you will be like crying a lot and not even, subhanallah, enjoying any of the desire of this dunya. And in the same line, the Prophet ﷺ said, take advantage of 5 out of 5. All of you know the hadith. Your youth before your old age. Still are, subhanallah, you youth, mashallah, you have the gift of the youthful gift. Take advantage of it. You have the time to pray, you are strong, mashallah, you can do a lot of things. Take advantage of your youth. You will be, subhanallah, resurrected in the day of judgment from those honored youth who used their youth to make their advancement to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In very, strong or very fast paces. What a great honor. قَالَ وَصِحَّتُكَ قَبْلَ سَقَمِكَ. And your health before you're someone falling ill. And then the Prophet ﷺ قال وَغِنَاكَ قَبْلَ فَقْرِكَ وَفَرَاغُكَ قَبْلَ شُغْلِكَ. And your empty time, your time before you become like busyness that you cannot do anything. Take advantage of that. وَحَيَاتُكَ قَبْلَ مَوْتِكَ. And your life before your death. Now continue with the second point, the warning, to believe in the warning. Go back to the Quran. You will not be able to really have a drive and close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we not truly, genuinely believe into this aspect of the warning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentioned the punishment and the chastisement of the hellfire, قال إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً. Indeed, in this a sign for those who fear the punishment of hellfire. قال فَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ وَعِيدٍ. Remind people of the Quran for those who fear the warning. So if we do not fear the warning, if we feel like we are safe, then we'll not be admonished by the Quran. We'll not be deriving the benefit and the gems from the Quran. It's not possible. Why? Because we do not have that heart to make us really, subhanallah, in a state of fear. And قال Allah subhanahu إنك مذكر من يخشاها. You are the warner of those who fear this warning. So if we do not have that aspect of fearing the warning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we will not be able to ignite that drive into our heart. It's not possible. The third element of seed is to reflect on the story of those great people who have the very high spirit, the Messenger of Allah and the Salihin, and you see in them your example, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, that you read on Friday in Surah Al-Sajdah, تَتَجَافَى جُنُوبُهُمْ. Their sides are forsaken their beds. Just try, wallahi, subhanallah, reflect on that. Now, you know what is the high spirit, what is al-himma, ulu al-himma? He said, it's قُوَّةٌ بِعَاثٍ لِلْمَقْصُودِ. It's like a force from inside you, just to drive you, subhanallah, to go toward what you want to achieve. Is the pleasure of Allah, is the Jannah, is whatever, subhanallah, great you want to do, which is make you, subhanallah, is like enforcing you. You, subhanallah, it's like it's pushing you. You cannot even avoid it. It's above you. Like you see people who longing for, subhanallah, the $1 million or longing for high diplomas, they don't sleep the night. It's something that drive was pushing them. This is how these noble ones, they cannot sleep the night. Try to understand it. Let's think about it. How come, subhanallah, I'm sleeping sound in my bed and I cannot even, I'm turning on the left and the right, then I wake up and pray. What is in the heart of these people? So these people are not like, subhanallah, fiction. It's not something created, as a novel. No, this is people that Allah described in His book. Real people. People who exist. تَتَجَافَى جُنُوبُهُمْ عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ. Look, that noble man in Surah Yasin, he was not a messenger. He came to help in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. According to Al-Tafsir, he was killed. He was not saying, Ya Allah, punish them. He said, I wish my people, they know. This is the high spirit, subhanallah, of longing toward advancing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wishing everybody like it will be the same. Therefore, when we have this element, we are building slowly this drive. Because when the companion, they received the revelation from the Prophet ﷺ of سابقوا, compete, hasten, and قال سابقوا وسارعوا, and hasten, وسابقوا, race. They, subhanAllah, they didn't stop racing. They didn't stop racing. And they were like, subhanAllah, going forward. And look in the story that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Imran, given as the event of Uhud. After they've been wounded, they answered the call of Allah and His Messenger. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us afterward, then فَانْقَلَبُوا, they left, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, showered them with His blessing, and gave them the triumph, and nothing harm had touched them. قَالَ وَاتَّبَعُوا رِضْوَانَ, because they followed the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So their drive, who had them to be strong like that, who had them to endure all this difficulty, is that strong high spirit, that drive, that himma aliyah towards seeking Ridwanullah. So they are advancing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept them, to be pleased with them. And if today we want to do that, how can we build it? We have the seeds that we have mentioned. Start those seeds. What's going to develop in you is going to develop in you the fear of Allah. And that's it, the most important into our life. Because the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot come out of nothing. The fear of Allah need to have foundation. What is this foundation? This fear of warning. Which means this warning, it becomes like part of your daily reality. This warning. When you think of Saqar, it's become, subhanAllah, something true. It's not something like it's far, or something like is an illusion or is an imagination. No, something is true. So when you interact with it, look Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the example of the people who were reflecting on the creation of the heaven and the earth, and they were remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قَالَ يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِهِمْ, and they يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, they are reflecting into and pondering in the creation of the heaven and the earth. What they said, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا, Allah, you didn't create this is aimlessly or with no purpose. And then when they said, oh Allah, shield us from the hellfire. Look how they connected. So the fearing of the warning helped them to be rooted in knowledge, helped them to be into, subhanAllah, the remembrance of Allah, helped them to direct their knowledge and their wisdom to the most important thing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used 3 oaths to tell us this is one of the greatest calamities of the hereafter, of the whole existence. إِنَّهَا لَإِحْدَى الْكُبَرِ. So it becomes part of your life. The second aspect is that when you read the Quran, because all what you need to build this high spirit, to build this eagerness, to build this drive is in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the start by building it, by fearing and interacting and live the reality of the wa'id, of the warning. That's how it's going to build it slowly and gradually with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second aspect, you have the Quran to have an effect on you. Spiritual effect and physical effect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the ayat of the Quran from which the skin of the believer shiver. تَقْشَعِرُّ مِنْهُ جُلُودُ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ, those who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ثُمَّ تَلِينُ جُلُودُهُمْ وَقُلُوبُهُمْ, then their skin softened and their heart to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah mentioned, those who, the true believers, when they listen to the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their heart to tremble with fear. Subhanallah. And their ayat, it increased them in faith. That's what we need. If not, we are from those who deserted the Quran. That's the reality. That's the reality of all of us. And that's why we have this opportunity. Allah gave you the life to be here in the night of Ramadan. This is the night, the day before Ramadan. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the life to reach and attain Laylatul Qadr. But we have to be aware of such a thing. We have to build this drive. And this drive is going to help us to make the right choice, that we are advancing. We don't want to advance with Allah in a passive way, in lagging back and thinking that we are advancing. No, it has to require a drive, and this drive needs to hasten toward the thing. And as we said, to righteous deeds, and as we have explained, with those element, how to be mindful of the time and the state and the gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us. The last point, ikhwani, all of that, it's not something that require, years of studies. It is in the book of Allah. You can make it this month, inshaAllah ta'ala. Why? Because it's in the Quran. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, how he was in the Jahiliyyah. He was Jabbar, someone like tyrant. Here at the beginning of Surah Taha changed his heart. Just the beginning of Surah Taha. He heard it. And he said to his sister, "What this?" He said, "No, don't touch it. You are impure." Can you imagine Umar at that time, being a tyrant person, he humbled himself to go wash to just read this paper. And when he read it, he was mesmerized. He said, "Take me to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." And then when he entered, Hamza was behind the door. They thought that he came for evil. Hamza held him and he fell on his knees. Actually, the Prophet ﷺ held him. He said, "What do you want, Ya Umar?" He said, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah." That's the power of the Quran. People, non-Muslim, they were Christian truthful. They were waiting for the revelation. When they heard the Prophet ﷺ reciting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned them in the Quran. قَالَ وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا مَا أُنزِلَ. When they heard what has been revealed to the Prophet, you see their eyes overflowing of tears. That's the power of the Quran, the beautiful magic of the Quran, the gems of the Quran. And we are starting the month of the Quran. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us all this benefit of the Quran, to have such heart like the heart of Umar and the heart of those who accepted Islam by just listening to the Quran. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. Building the hard drive, the drive to advance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a necessity for everyone who want to honor themselves and want to save themselves from hellfire. The hellfire, لا تبقي ولا تذر لواحة للبشر, scorching the skin. والعياذ بالله. I mean, it's beyond what we can think. But you want to protect yourself. How? Be close to the book of Allah with your heart and with an attentive ear and with focus. Don't make the month to read it just to make how many khatma you want to make, finish the Quran like 10 times or 5 times or 2 times. No, take your time. You want the Quran to change you. You don't want it just to make you thinking that we are making hasanat. Let the Quran change you. Said, "Yeah, Allah, help this Quran, in which you put your guidance, in which you put the light, in which you put your illumination. Help me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have that heart who will be longing toward you, to have from those who make taqaddum ilayka ya Rasul, ya Allah." The Ansar, they didn't know nothing. The Ansar. That just the Prophet ﷺ sent with them Mus'ab ibn Umayr for 1 year. Just a few, they met the Prophet ﷺ. And for 1 year, Mus'ab was teaching Islam and few ayat of the Quran. It changed their life. To the point they said, "Till when we're going to leave the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca?" Subhanallah, qala khaif, he's fearful and he's like into the values of Mecca. It's like we have to go and help. And they went. And when the Prophet ﷺ make for them the pledge, the covenant, they give the covenant this time for everything, even subhanAllah to give their life. What changed them? What changed this heart? Eat the Quran. Even As'ad ibn Zurar, he said, "Do you know the meaning of giving your oath to the Prophet? Do you know what it means? That you're going to go against all the Arab Peninsula, all the tribes, all of them. And the best among you is going to be killed. And then you're going to be striking by the swords. Do you know that?" They said, "Move away. We know what we are doing. We're going to give everything everything and give our pledge to the Prophet ﷺ for whatever he asks us. And he's going to give us the Jannah. This is, dear brother, require a lot of thinking. The Prophet ﷺ, they given their life. And the Prophet, he given them the Jannah. Why? Because Allah said the Jannah in the Quran. So it's real. They live, they smell, subhanAllah, they have the scent of paradise when they read it. And that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we asking Allah to help us to sense and to elevate our iman to the level to have yaqeen in whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us in the Quran. That's we're going to be among from those who make taqaddum. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us be for those, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bestow upon us such a barakah and a great drive to do the maximum of worship in Ramadan, a quality worship that help us to cleanse our heart and to purify our soul. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us al-Iman wal-Ihtisab, the true faith in fasting and in praying and reading Quran and making the Taraweeh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the Ihtisab, and the Ihtisab is this drive that make you always to be longing for the approval of Allah and His pleasure subhanahu wa ta'ala. فنسألك اللهم أن ترزقنا الإيمان والاحتساب في العبادات في القيام والصلاة والصيام يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل هذا الشهر مباركا علينا. اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا أجمعين واجعلنا من عتقائك من النيران في هذا الشهر الكريم. اللهم تب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وأقيم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.